Today on the Clean Power Hour, Community Solar and Agrivoltaics. My guest today is Michael Marsch. He is the Chief Development Officer for BlueWave Solar. And before we get into the interview, I want to encourage our listeners to please give us a rating and review at Spotify or Apple. Those are the two best ways to give us a rating and a review so others can find the podcast and help us speed the energy transition. We also have a YouTube channel. So if you go to cleanpowerhour.com and click on the YouTube icon, you will find the channel and you can subscribe there. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Tim. Great to be here.
So it's heady days in the United States. We just got the IRA passed, and this is going to, by my estimation, give us a 3x ramp rate on solar and storage in the next 10 years. It's going to be a massive explosion of growth in solar and storage. We were already riding a massive wave, but now it is truly an explosion. And you see this in the mainstream media now, just lots and lots of news about the investment opportunity for consumer investors and, of course, institutional investors. And BlueWave is a good example of that. We will get into that story. But for our listeners, Mike, what is your background? How did you get interested in clean energy? And how did you come to BlueWave?
Yeah, it is heady days. We're thrilled and excited. And yeah, quickly, my background, I come from conventional real estate development about 9 years ago. Was lucky to connect with the founders of BlueWave, very early days when they were growing up, building the company in Massachusetts. I had the opportunity to come in and apply what I knew about building, golf courses and office towers and take that into the solar game and go build a bunch of projects, but also our development team from the ground up. And, 9 years later, have never looked back at doing anything else because, the purpose and the mission and everything that I think a lot of folks are in clean energy for is what's drawn me and what's going to keep me here for the long term.
Yeah, I love solar because there are so many mission-driven people and companies. I am a fish in water, so to speak. I joined the solar industry full-time in 2016, but I grew up doing solar thermal in my backyard in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the 1970s. I didn't know what PV was at the time. It was not really in the landscape. It was very expensive. It was there. It was invented in 1954, if you didn't know that. And I just named my sailboat Vanguard 1 after the first satellite that the U.S. launched, which was solar powered. And so solar, had a good 70 years of maturation. So it's mature technology. The cost adoption curve has brought the price down significantly. It's down about 80% in the last 10 years. And now we are just leaning in and stepping on the gas. The other important data point for anyone listening to this interview is that we don't need a huge portion of our landscape to completely green the grid. We need 1 to 2% to completely green the grid with solar, batteries, and wind power. We've already converted 6% of the landscape in the United States to roads and buildings. So it's a fraction of what we've already built on. And so solar and wind truly are light on the land for many reasons, which we will talk about here, in the realm of agrivoltaics or dual use solar. But Mike, what are you guys up to at BlueWave? Give us the big picture and tell us why Axium was so interested in investing in you.
Yeah, so BlueWave, for those who we haven't met yet in the industry, born in Massachusetts, grew up in the early days of the SREC program, really focused as a DG scale solar developer in the US, and have kind of taken that footprint and grown it to the broader Northeast. We're really focused as a regional developer, don't want to be national, don't want to be global. We really focused on being a best in breed, primarily DG scale developer on the solar side, and always been very mission driven. The original founder of the company, John DeVillers, was appointed by President Clinton to run the New England EPA, longtime public servant and environmental warrior. And that ethos has really informed what we do and how we do it. We became certified as a B Corp in 2017, really saw that as a a natural extension of who we are as a company. And these days, the footprint is that kind of Northeast regional focus, gigawatt, 2 gigawatt to 2 gigawatts of pipeline in process, working towards gigawatt and a half NTP'd by 2025. And that's, I think, what Axium really saw was, the whole premise of the partnership we formed and announced this year was, BlueWave has this mission commitment and this particular investment focus. Axium is a very long-term, open-ended fund that takes a very long view towards building and owning infrastructure, and was, what was most important to us, extremely aligned from a values and a mission standpoint. And so, that partnership has just been very, very natural around, just continuing to deliver clean energy projects.
Yeah, I can imagine that development is very capital intensive, and you want to make as big an impact as you can in your lane, right? And you guys are working in the community solar arena primarily. This is 1 to 10 megawatt projects. These are say 1 to 50 acre solar farms, or 2 to 50 acre solar farms. And you really made a mark, in my mind, by being thought leaders in the realm of agrivoltaics. I want to geek out on that. That's a very hot topic, because I think it appeals to rural communities that you can do agriculture on solar farms. It doesn't have to be, quote unquote, an industrial only facility. It can be an agricultural facility. You can grow crops. You can graze sheep under solar arrays. And this is very much being done, as anyone in the industry knows. And for those of you who are listening who aren't, just Google agrivoltaics and or dual use solar, and you will find and this is happening all over the world. You can also grow food crops like strawberries and spinach, and so there's many opportunities for dual use or multi-use solar. And just thinking about the conversion of land from whatever the current land use is. Here in the Midwest where I live, it's primarily corn and bean farming. So these are cash crops, very heavy on the land, with chemicals and chemical inputs and fertilizers, converted to a field growing grass or hopefully pollinator seed mix, and then potentially being used in agricultural ways like grazing. So it's good for the land. It's really restorative to the land if you treat the land well, and you can do that in the solar realm. But what was it about agrivoltaics, I guess, that got you guys interested, and where have you seen the state of the art move in the last 5-6 years? Yeah,
to your point, there's we as an industry, we are light on the land relative to lots of other uses, relative to a parking lot or a subdivision. But still, when you look at the use of land for solar, and you kind of draw out the curve, particularly now with the passage of the IRA and a lot of the other supportive federal and state level policy, we're talking about millions of acres going into a solar use. And I wouldn't necessarily use the word conversion, because you're not necessarily taking land away from another use for the long term. But still, you're talking about millions of acres that will go from being whatever it is today to primarily a solar use. And we thought about that, and you looked at what was happening in the early days of the industry. It just felt like there was a lot of waste. You'd build a solar array, and at that time we're just running around just trying to get projects done because the industry was in its infancy. But you put up a fence and a gate and kind of lock the gate and walk away, and totally miss the opportunity to keep using the land, under the panels, around the panels for a more productive, long-term purpose. So, combine that sense of a missed opportunity with our values around kind of triple bottom line, thinking about not just the ecological impact, but the local economic development impact and the clean energy impact. And there's this huge and very natural opportunity to do more with the land where we are building a project. So what that has led us to over time, and others have been on this journey as well, is yes, absolutely, we should be planting in and around arrays with pollinator friendly seed mixes. That's, in our view, kind of table stakes at this point. Everybody should be doing that everywhere. Grazing sheep is also really natural. It actually just makes pure economic sense from an O&M standpoint. Sheep operating costs are not rising with inflation, while the cost of running a gas-powered mower is, for example. But even there's an even more elegant synergy where, plants love shade. Certain plants love shade. Solar panels love the evaporative cooling of crops planted beneath them. There's even, the more you look, the more you see these really awesome synergies between an active agricultural use and a solar use.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. It's not only a viable place to grow crops under, in the shade under the solar panels, and the sheep love the shade as well, right? It makes them less thirsty, less heat stressed, and so when you visit or see photos of sheep on solar arrays, you often will see them basking in the shade. But it's good for the solar production, right? So heat is the enemy of solar panels, which is a little ironic because they're designed to capture energy from the sun. But heat causes resistance, and the array will be less productive as it heats up. So that evaporative energy from the plants is cooling the backside of the array and cooling the array in general. And so it's a win-win. We are also creating organic farm ground. After a solar array has been there for 30 years, from whatever the land use was, of course, there's different land uses that came before the solar. Here in the Midwest, though, it's mostly row cropping, and so steel piles and some buried cables in the ground is absolutely benign and good for the soil. The soil is resting and gathering much more biotic activity. Many more microorganisms are going to be growing in that soil, and truly you can have organic farm ground, which is going to make the ground more valuable. So it's just a win-win-win. And then there's, of course, the economic aspects of this. This is a huge economic boon and boom for job creation, for growth of technology, that whole economy, making the energy transition, stepping us back from the brink of climate chaos, improving human health. The benefits of the clean energy transition are so many and so rich. It boggles the mind. We forget sometimes, and that's the other thing that I like about the solar industry, is that we are more conscious of this. But fossil fuel pollution kills 8 million people a year in the world. It's a holocaust on an annual basis, which, of course, when we have a war, a real holocaust, we don't stand for that and we take action. Well, we've kind of been sitting by the sidelines for decades, watching this disaster unfold, not only on human health, but of course on the environment and on future generations. And now we're doing something about it with the IRA, and congratulations to the Biden administration and to the solar industry and SEIA, who lobbied so hard to make this happen. This infrastructure bill is truly massive. I think it's $370 billion for clean energy and environment. And we're going from here to here in the next 10 years. We're really climbing that S curve, and it is very, very heady days. So anybody listening, reach out to me if you want to get into the solar or clean tech industries. I love networking and helping people find their toehold. If you're coming from another energy industry, you're welcome. And any other industry, right? We need all kinds of professionals. Mike, what else is on your mind, though, I guess, about community solar and agrivoltaics? And I don't want to miss the fact also that BlueWave spun off Perch Energy. Check out episode 80 with Bruce Stewart, who's the CEO of Perch, which is a community solar service company helping to subscribe consumers and business owners to community solar projects. So that's a dedicated company now. So BlueWave is really creating quite the legacy. But what else should our listeners know about your guys' work, in the present day and moving forward? And if you would address, we touched on it, that Axium infrastructure made a major investment in BlueWave, and that gives you some legs. And so I'd love for you to riff a little bit on the future of BlueWave with those newfound coffers.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned Perch, because it kind of glossed over community solar as a part of the overall mix here. We're so excited about agrivoltaics because it's this way to not just use the land productively, but also kind of foster a local agricultural economy. You get to say as a developer now that not only are we bringing a clean energy project, and if you add storage to a solar project, now we're a much more useful asset on the grid. I also get to say, we're paying local tax revenue. We've been doing that for years, but now, local jobs, like you're creating long-term. There's a new job being created here with agrivoltaic technicians. You're supporting long-term farm stability, farm ownership. You're really making a contribution at the local economic level. Community solar is yet another way to do that, to share the benefits of these projects that are really sited. We focus at the DG scale. And so, as you said, 1 to 10 megawatt projects. We're putting projects in folks' communities, and community solar is that vehicle to then share energy savings in that community. And so we, as you mentioned, built what is now called Perch Energy. Actually, glossed over the fact that I ran that business for a couple of years, pre-revenue to just before the spin out, and when it became Perch. And a huge part of that was tying back to our mission, which is about access. It's not just about like, hey, let's transform the energy system. That's great. Like we're thrilled to be doing that, but we firmly believe that everybody should share in the benefits of this new energy system that, to a lot of the points you made, is hopefully and on its way to solving a lot of the ills of the existing and historic energy system. But I will acknowledge that with community solar, we've already seen an unfortunate kind of skewing of the benefits go to well-off folks with good credit scores. That's who the industry's kind of served so far in the majority. So, Bruce and the folks at Perch have been working hard, and we at BlueWave have still been working hard to find ways to get community solar into low and moderate income communities where, in a lot of cases, those communities have borne the brunt of the existing energy system. I'm thrilled to see the energy justice and environmental justice focus in the IRA and the structure of the IRA and the incremental tax credits or incremental value on the ITC, because we firmly believe that's critical to a just energy transition. And to tie that out to your question on Axium, that's a lot of what they see as well. Is their investment focus is a very clear kind of social element to it, in addition to the clean energy and dollars and cents focus. And we're on that mission as well. So taking the benefit of that partnership, where we've kind of grown out of the stage of small companies with a couple bucks and a good idea, into the stage where we're trying to build large infrastructure at scale. We're really excited to have the benefit of a capital partner with a long-term view and the kind of resource that we feel we were going to need to be effective and compete for the long term.
Yeah, I just sitting here listening to myself and yourself, it reminds me of just the layer cake that is this wonderful thing called clean energy. We're creating manufacturing jobs. We're reshoring manufacturing. There's significant incentives in the IRA to reshore manufacturing, and that works, right? That's industrial policy. Q-Cells is looking at building a ginormous solar and storage factory here in the U.S. now, and it takes that long-term assurity that there is going to be a glide path, so to speak. It's good for landowners. A landowner in the Midwest can triple their income converting from leasing their land for cash cropping to leasing their land to a solar developer who's going to give them guaranteed income with a small escalator for 20 or 30 years. And so it is good for rural communities. And then, of course, there's the tax income for the local districts, primarily school districts, but all kinds of taxing bodies. We have like 15 different taxing bodies in Illinois that benefit from clean energy projects. And these rural communities really need a shot in the arm. They are struggling. They're struggling to keep the next generation interested in these small town communities. They want, the young people want to go to the big city where the action is, and they are leaving in droves. And so this provides an anchor for landowners. So I know that solar and wind have their critics. I don't know if you have any comments about that. You do see stories in the news of projects getting not permitted, for example, or they're being what we call NIMBYism. It's something that we in the solar industry need to take seriously and need to get better at being proactive about educating communities. What is this? How does it work? What are the long-term impacts on the land? What happens to solar panels when they're decommissioned and those kinds of things? What are your thoughts about developing solar projects and local communities?
It is critical. I think if we want to keep our social license, and you see what happens, when an industry starts to lose that with oil and gas, and I would even argue some of the utilities, if we want to be in this very favorable position we're in now, where we're viewed as a solution and not a problem, we have to be incredibly responsible with the way we approach local communities and the way we use land. And that really does, for us, tie back to agrivoltaics in a lot of cases, because when you're going to a community and saying, yeah, I'm going to take this 50 or 100 acres and it's going to become a power plant, and some folks may not like the view, but it's going to have big picture environmental benefits that are very abstract, and you may not ever see a piece of in any real way. That's very different and a lot harder conversation than going to folks and saying, I know this is some of the best farmland in town. Great news, it'll continue to be actively farmed. In fact, the farmer who's been farming it for 2 generations will continue, that family will continue to actually farm it, not just own it and collect a check. And we're going to pay the local tax revenue and all the points you made. It's not a panacea. It's not going to solve every person who doesn't like the look of a solar project and their objections, which we understand, right? Folks come into a community with the expectation that it's going to be more or less the way it was when they got there, and a solar project introduces change, and everybody, no matter where they live or where they sit, has a gut reaction to change, and it's not always positive. And so we understand that, but we do see real tangible things we can do in the way these projects are developed. Community outreach in the front end is always just the right thing to do, but then really highlighting a lot of these benefits where it's not a long-term loss of farmland. It's an opportunity for folks to participate directly through community solar if that's available. That goes a long way for us, as an industry to keeping our social license.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clean Power Hour or viewing it on YouTube. We do have a great YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go to cleanpower.group and hit that YouTube icon and subscribe to our channel. Of course, you can find all of our content on your favorite audio platform as well. So please give us a rating and review. Back to the show. Yeah, I love the low and middle income aspects of solar and community solar. There's major incentives in the IRA incentivizing developers to use American-made products and to benefit low and middle income communities. The big incentive heretofore has been the ITC, the investment tax credit, right, which was 26%. Now it's 30% until 2034, and it's retroactive. And so that is just very good. We have a standalone ITC now for storage, but the ITC goes to 60% on some projects now depending on the content of the technology and the constituents who are going to benefit from the project. So that is huge. I guess one of the questions is, how quickly can we ramp U.S. manufacturing? We're still in the early days of establishing, solar panel manufacturing, inverter manufacturing. We're further along in racking. There are several large racking companies, namely Nextracker and ATI, Array Technologies, who are born and bred in the United States. And we have a healthy U.S. steel industry, although we do import a lot of steel from elsewhere. And before I forget, our listeners can check out ASGA, the American Solar Grazing Association, at solargrazing.org. That's a wonderful group that Lexi Hain established, and she was on the show. I don't know the episode number off the top of my head, but just Google Lexi Hain and ASGA. They have a new executive director now. Have you, in the realm of codifying agrivoltaics and maturing our industry and really codifying best practices, where are you at? Where do you guys go for bleeding edge ideas on how to be better developers of agrivoltaic projects?
Yeah, I would give a shout out to the folks at NREL, who've been running actually for years now a working group called Inspire that is meant to kind of collect and surface a lot of those best practices and good ideas and really work them through. So folks, I think, and Lexi is part of that group, who've been visible on agrivoltaics. I'd also mention Byron Komanek and Jack Solar Garden, who I believe you might have had on the show. Yep. Have been really visible in agrivoltaics so far. I've been part of that venue where it's an acknowledgement that it's still relatively early days, and that if we really want to be successful and scale this, we need to come to clear definitions. Working through what those definitions are. For us, we do firmly believe, as I mentioned, that to plant a pollinator seed mix, again, great start, super important, but not necessarily an agrivoltaic project per se. And grazing is absolutely agrivoltaics, but there's a level of progression from there. And for us, that's entailed building projects that really have the agricultural use at parity with the solar use. So really thinking through, okay, if you kind of graft agriculture onto a conventional solar project with a conventional design as an afterthought, you're not going to get nearly as good an outcome as if you really design with the farmer first and with agriculture first. And that goes to things like row spacing. So you mentioned the cash crops, commodity crops in the Midwest. Right now, we're working on projects where we're really trying to crack the code on how to build an effective solar project that also has a really effective commodity crop use. Corn, for example, and potatoes and a few other crops. And when you really get a farmer engaged, we actually have someone on staff who comes from a deep farming background and conservation background. You get into the weeds of, okay, I need this row spacing to turn this particular, farm equipment and get under the rows, and the rows need to be this height. And, I think for me, that's the definition, is if you've really exerted, that level of nuance and thought and detail in the design of your project to enable that long-term active agricultural use.
So we've painted a very rosy picture, I think, of the solar industry, and it's very happy days. I mean, the IRA is a huge shot in the arm in what was already a massive transfer of wealth, as Jigar Shah likes to say. This is potentially $100 trillion global industry now in the next 10 years. But what are some of the challenges that energy professionals need to address and get better at, I guess, Mike? I think this is very important also, that we're constantly sharpening the saw and striving to be better a better industry, a more mature industry, and one that walks the talk?
Let's start with the composition of the industry itself. So far we've skewed white and male, and that there's not the diversity even that you would see in the general population, let alone in an industry that kind of upheld its stated goal of being more inclusive. So we need to diversify the workforce in the industry, full stop. From there, we need to get a hell of a lot better at sharing the benefits of the projects more directly. So I would call out Shalonda Baker, who's now in the administration, wrote a great book called Revolutionary Power that really goes deep on what a more just transition looks like and what a more meaningful sharing of the benefits of
Can you say that name again?
Yeah, Shalonda Baker, Revolutionary Power is the book.
Okay.
And a lot of those priorities are what are baked into the IRA and have been really forming federal policy from what I can tell.
Yeah. On the diversity end, it's not easy. This is not an easy problem to solve. I worked for an EPC for 5 years, a construction company that installed solar arrays, rooftop and community solar. And it's a very male environment. We're a construction company. Construction is a very male industry in general. And I'm just curious, I'm a huge fan of trade schools, for example. We have to start young, educating our children that there's more to life than going to college, for example. We need people to go and become electricians and welders and mechanical installers and laborers and all the professions that the full spectrum. But do you have any specific thoughts, I guess, about how do we recruit more women into clean tech? There is the organization Women in Clean Tech in the Bay Area, which is a wonderful group. And I know that SEIA is very much shining a light on this. We have to become more intentional. I myself struggle to find female guests for this show. I've had, it's very representative. It's probably 80% men and 20% women. And it needs to be more 50-50, which is what how the population is. But what are your thoughts about how do we get more women and people of color? I guess both populations are significantly underrepresented in clean tech and clean energy. What are you guys doing, I guess, to solve this problem?
Yeah, summer of 2020, we sat down, as a lot of folks did at that time, and wrote out a plan and some goals focused. We published it as our anti-racist action plan, and we actually just published a piece and holding ourselves accountable for progress relative to that plan. But a lot of what we've done so far is really focus on long-term talent pipeline development. Because you're right, when you get to the point of a hire, yes, there are absolutely tactical things you can and should do, to diversify the candidate pool, where you're looking and how we're evaluating talent and making sure that kind of drive out bias at every step, at that later stage, once you have a role posted and you're actually in the hiring process. But where, to your point, that only goes so far. What we really need to do is focus on long-term pipeline and talent development. And so, we've formed a lot of partnerships with folks in the industry, folks, educational institutions in our neighborhood in New England to foster that long-term development. It's very much playing the long game, but that's where we've put the most effort.
Very good. Very good. Well, in our last couple minutes together, Mike, what else are you excited about? You mentioned utility storage in our pre-show conversation. If you want to talk about storage, I love the fact that we now have standalone ITC on stationary storage. Of course, we're on the cusp of the electrification of transportation en masse, and that is a huge a huge piece of the puzzle, so to speak. 40% of greenhouse gas emissions are related to transportation. And you don't see it today in the US, right? Less than 2% or so of car sales or car and truck sales are pure EVs. But within 5 to 7 years, it's going to go to 100%, and it just takes 7 doublings. Once you're at 1%, 7 doublings gets you to 100%. And you'd be surprised how quickly that can happen. And then you look to the future by going to Western Europe, and they're already there. In Norway, I think BEVs and plug-in hybrids are 80% of new car sales. And then there's other countries, the Netherlands and Germany are on the 60% range, something like that. So Europeans are going hard after it. It helps that energy, they're paying more of the true cost of energy in Europe. We have very cheap, dirty fossil fuels here. And we complain about $5 a gallon gas. Well, go to Northern Europe. It's $10. Literally, it's twice what we pay, if not more. And the same on natural gas and other fossil fuels. Energy is just not cheap in Europe. And they make smaller homes and they drive smaller cars and they have way, way better public infrastructure for transportation. And so there is a benefit to humans paying the true cost of energy. It shouldn't be cheap. It's a good, we want affordable energy, but dirty energy should not be cheap, certainly. I'm not opposed to clean energy being affordable. And certainly that's a thrust of and a major winning point for community solar is it does make solar truly accessible to anybody who pays a power bill can now participate in the solar and storage economy. But what are you guys doing in the storage arena?
Yeah, so excited about storage because it really is, it's the answer to the question that we've created by trying to scale a whole industry doing intermittent distributed generation, right? And as we've kind of waded into storage and really wrapped our minds around what's possible and all the different use cases, what emerges really quickly is, within the kind of walls of BlueWave in our portfolio, but even more broadly, in given state markets or RTOs or even at the industry level, we have this huge opportunity to manage like a much more comprehensive, holistic energy transition than you do if you just think in terms of a narrow slice of I build these intermittent generation projects, and it's somebody else's problem to figure out how to manage that at the grid level. We can by understanding kind of the grid problems that we create with our renewables projects and the potential solutions that storage represents, we can really drive the overall transition faster by coming to utilities, coming to regulators, coming to policymakers and saying, here's how these two things can work well together. And here's what we need to do to dramatically accelerate the deployment. I think you quoted Jigger earlier, and one of the things I always stuck in my head was just deploy. Like we have the technologies, it just needs to get out there. And as we've kind of wrestled with first climbing the learning curve ourselves, but also then helping folks we deal with at utilities on the technical side, really understand what's possible with storage. It's clear that we as an industry need to be able to really clearly articulate those value propositions as a kind of macro level, but also at the technical level to get more of the stuff deployed. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about really getting to that point where we can bring that value prop to the table and enable a much more, much faster and more just transition.
Here in Illinois, we have legislation incentivizing the transition of coal plants to solar and batteries. Batteries are like a giant shock absorber. Mm-hmm. They're a two-way street, right? They can absorb energy and they can inject energy. And solar panels are more of a one-way street, right? When the sun is at midday, they're injecting full steam. And that can be a stressor on the grid. And so batteries are very good to pair with solar in the greater scheme of things. They, of course, also provide a much broader shoulders to clean energy. You can store energy from the sun in a battery and then discharge it later in the evening. So you get more resiliency in the case of a grid outage. You get more benefits financially. There's a greater value stack to the storage facility. In ERCOT in Texas, there's as much storage now in development on the grid as there is solar. And solar, Texas passed California, I think, as the #1 solar market this year. So there's just massive expansion of solar and batteries now in many parts of the country. Not all, but many. And I happen to be in one of those places. We have a $250 per kWh incentive. That's per kWh, per kilowatt hour, to install storage. So if you're a solar installer, solar developer, and you haven't been doing storage projects, you should get in that game, and you can reach out to me and I will tell you how to do that. You have to find the right partners. Not everyone understands PJM and MISO. Those are the markets I operate in most, and every market has its unique value stack. So you have to really get dialed in with some local companies that understand that and can dial that in. But the ROI for customers is eye-popping, right? It's a 2-year payback on the storage now, and solar and storage, it overall is like 5x what the solar alone would have given you in terms of ROI. So it's a total game changer, and that's only getting sweeter now with the IRA at our backs. Mike, it's been a great pleasure. I really congratulate you on all your success at BlueWave. Congratulations on the Axium acquisition. And how can our listeners reach you?
Thanks so much. It's been a great time. Really appreciate all the work you're doing to spread the good word on clean energy. And if folks want to find us, it's bluewave.energy.
Very good. Well, I'm Tim Montague. Please check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. We make this content for you. And if you're listening to this, the best thing you can do is give us a rating and review. Of course, subscribe to the show on your audio platform and on YouTube, and share it with a friend. Just send them a link to a show sometime and say, hey, check this out. That would be wonderful. Please reach out to me. I love hearing from my listeners. I'm TG Montague on Twitter. You can reach me on the contact form on cleanpowerhour.com. And with that, I'll say, let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.